On this episode of Militaria at the museum, we explore the Second World War Boeing Stearman Kaydet. Next, we delve into the story of William and Thomas Pullen, whose Arctic medals symbolize their incredible journey. Finally, we explore the evolution of helmets, uncovering how the harsh demands of war have driven their rapid innovation. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the museum. I'm at the Aviation Museum to uncover the history of the Boeing Stearman Kaydet with expert Mark People. The Kaydet is an aircraft that served as a rite of passage for countless pilots, marking the beginning of their journey into the skies. How does the Stearman Kaydet lend itself to being an effective pilot trainer?
Well, the Stearman Kaydet was an effective pilot trainer because it was relatively easy to fly, but it was big, impressive, and it was fairly rugged. So all these factors would provide a great starting point for someone to learn to fly with it. Stearman was used by the United States Army Air Force. It was used by the U.S. Navy, as well as the RCAF in their elementary flying training programs. And it was basically the first step on a pilot's trajectory for flying.
Mark, take me through some of the key features of this aircraft.
Well, the key features of this aircraft it's a biplane. So it actually has two wings, so we're actually standing where the wings would be. We can't put them on because obviously for space, and we're out of space here. But the aircraft is essentially a welded metal tube airframe. So there's a metal tube airframe underneath there with a wood and fabric covering. So it's all fabric covered. And if you put your finger in it, you could probably pop the fabric. We don't want to do that either. And open cockpit as well too. Now, principally, this open cockpit was used by the U.S. Navy and, of course, the U.S. Army Air Corps. Canada used them, but because of the nature of the weather in Canada, there was actually a modification to put plastic canopies on the aircraft.
So what sort of time frame was the Air Force using these to train?
Our Air Force used them from about 1941 to 42, a small period in there. The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, the BCATP, was Canada's largest contribution to its Second World War effort. It was basically training pilots, aircrew for the Allied forces across from the UK and across the Commonwealth. In order for a trainee pilot to even move on to the next step, he'd have to master the Stearman. And if he'd mastered it, he would obviously be passed on to the next step. And it is initial, if you've passed that initial stint with the Stearman and got further, you were actually on your way to become a pilot. You're trying to train pilots from the first, you'd lose a lot of either aircraft through accidents or anything else like that. So you want an aircraft that's relatively easy to maintain. It's got a fairly good Orion performance, proven design, and proven maintenance, and that's probably the biggest factor.
And compared to the Harvard, this would be quite a simple plane to fly, would it not?
Well, it would be in a sense, because with the Harvard, you have to worry about undercarriage coming up and putting it down, more importantly. But in this case, you have fixed undercarriage, you have relatively simple controls, you've got a different sort of weight characteristic to it. Not as heavy, but it's still quite a heavy aircraft.
This is quite a recent acquisition for the museum. How did you acquire it, Mark?
Well, it actually was flown in the Annapolis Valley by a farmer by the name of Harry Morse. Unfortunately, Harry died a couple years ago, and the family decided that they would donate it to the museum.
Do you think we could take a look inside?
Yeah, we can certainly look inside, and you can get an idea of that way.
I have to say, Mark, my first impression getting inside here is that there's not a whole lot going on.
No, there isn't a lot in there. And again, this is why it's a basic elementary trainer, is the fact that you've basically got 6 instruments that you look at. Obviously, you've got a throttle to give you your force of the engine, but that's it. So very little windscreen. Your fuel gauge is right in front of you, so you couldn't even see that. And also, your fuel tank is up here, so it's sitting up that way in front of you. The other thing is that when that engine spins, you may get a little bit of oil come back at you, but that's hopefully not much. But it's fairly loud and noisy, and again, it's just the nature of what this sort of aircraft is. It's sort of raw flying as well too, and you're sitting, in an open cockpit as well too. So it is sort of a visual and a sort of essential experience to fly in one of these things.
So you said there's 6 main instruments here. What would those be?
Airspeed, altitude, reckoning where you're going, engine RPMs, and temperature, and your flight level, up and down, and bank indicator. That's it.
Right, and then when I'm looking down here, I have 2 pedals, and then I have the stick. So what are those controlling?
Well, your stick is your ailerons and your back and forth on the elevators, and your rudders the pedals are for the rudder, so left or right, depending which way you're going. If you're taxiing with the aircraft, you can use it on the ground, and then when you're once flying.
Right, and so there are 2 seats in this aircraft, and they're sort of identical, each seat. Is that sort of a setup that could be utilized by an instructor and then the person being trained on the aircraft?
Exactly, so either way you could operate it from the front or the back. In most cases, they generally put the instructor in the back and the pilot up, and the trainee pilot up front. Because of the technology, engine technology, they tended to go to aircraft that are designed specifically to spray fields and crops and various things like that. Also, firefighting as well. They're smaller and they're more agile, and they also tend to have turbine engines on the front, not the piston engine that we have here. So
being as we're now 80 years on from the original manufacture of most of these aircraft, and there are so many still flying, they must be a well-built plane.
You're sitting on a tubular frame. The tubular frame is fairly heavy duty to people have them today, and to restore them and to work on them fairly easily. And there's still a number of parts available for them, so it's not a stretch to restore one of these even today to fly.
Mark, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to step down into the cockpit. It really takes one back in time to that era of the Second World War, and what was really that first step for so many budding young pilots.
Well, in fact, you have been in the time machine, so it has taken you back. The Stearman was a recent acquisition for the museum, and it was generously donated by the Morse family to the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum in memory of their father, Harry, who it was his pride and joy, and he flew it for about 20 years. So it certainly is a testament to not only the training ability of the aircraft, but also to the memory of Harry Morse.
Coming up, we'll learn about the legacy of William and Thomas Pullen, whose Arctic medals tell a tale of bravery and resilience in one of history's most challenging expeditions. Over at the Navy Museum, expert Jennifer Gamble is sharing the extraordinary story of William and Thomas Pullen, 2 brothers who earned their Arctic medals during daring missions across the unforgiving North. I understand that there's a truly fascinating story, not only of these medals themselves, but also how they got here to the museum.
Absolutely. Actually, how they got here came via Hugh Francis Pullen's family. A couple of years ago, his daughters came to the museum to donate the majority of what you see here in this display case, which belonged to their father. And the brother had a series of family heirlooms and a couple of medals that he wished to donate to us, but that's not where the story ends. The medals actually came from England before they were here in Canada. So back during the Second World War, the Pullen family had a home in Plymouth. Unfortunately, it was suffering from the Blitz, and so they contacted their family member here in Canada, who was Hugh Francis Pullen, to say, can you please come pick up some family heirlooms and treasures and bring them back to Canada for safekeeping. So he went to England, retrieved the medals and other items from the family, brought them back to Canada, He passed them on to his eldest son, and then when his eldest son passed away in 2016, they passed it on to his younger son, William Pullen. Only just the other year that William Pullen reached out to us and said, well, since you have a lot already of my family's legacy in your museum, he thought this would be the most appropriate place to have the medals.
Just what do the two faces of these medals depict?
Well, on one side, typically of most medals, you have a monarch. So this is Queen Victoria in her younger years. And then on the other side is a depiction of a ship similar to the Uberus and Terror being trapped in the ice in the Northwest Passage.
Right, and the medal would have been worn with the monarch's head side showing, is that right?
Yes, that's typically how they're shown. Yeah. The Arctic Medal awarded by Queen Victoria is a very unique and rare medal. It was only ever given to less than 1,500 recipients. It was given to not only Royal Navy officers, but it was also given to American scientists and civilians and other British citizens, all who went to the Arctic either for Arctic discovery or to look for Franklin himself.
What's really fascinating about this pair of medals, given how rare they are, is that they were awarded to two brothers.
Yes, definitely very rare that two brothers would be on the same expedition and awarded the same medal. They were indeed. William and Thomas Pullen were serving in the Royal Navy, and they went on a mission on HMS North Star to go looking for Franklin. And this happened in 1849 to 1851. So this happened just after the loss of Franklin. In fact, when Franklin was lost, his wife commissioned and funded multiple missions to find him. Call it true love, call it determination. Over a dozen of these expeditions went looking for him. And Thomas and William were on one of these expeditions.
Really? And tell me a bit about that expedition. Were they in any way successful?
Unfortunately not. I mean, they didn't find Franklin, and as we know, nobody found the ships of Franklin until recently. Actually, William went out the first time on an independent mission looking for Franklin, coming via Alaska into the Northwest Passage, which was unsuccessful, unfortunately. He ended up spending 2 years in the Arctic before he went back home, but the minute he got back home to England, he immediately went on another ship, but this time at HMS the North Star, with his brother. The Star went on the mission with 5 other vessels, but the Star was the only one to return. It wasn't uncommon for families to serve together in the Royal Navy, but for them to be posted to the same ship on a special expedition probably would have been very unique for the time.
Just how dangerous were these missions to the Arctic?
Traveling to the Northwest Passage and the Arctic was a dangerous venture. It was very easy for people to get lost in the passage, to get trapped in the sea ice, and to be put in a situation that they were not familiar with, and which basically meant they couldn't survive. It was a foreign environment. It was a dangerous mission, and so when they came back home from it, even though they were unsuccessful in finding Franklin, they were awarded these medals for their effort. I mean, you think about Franklin himself, he went to the Arctic twice before his final expedition. The man loved it. It had a sense of adventure. It was the new frontier. It was the unexplored for Europeans. And of course, the fame that would have come to be the person to make it across the Northwest Passage would have been absolutely legendary. And so it drove a lot of Royal Navy officers and other individuals to try to make that passage across.
Knowing just how dangerous this expedition to the Arctic would have been, what sort of preparations went into assuring that this ship would come back?
So in the case of William and Thomas on HMS the North Star, they had a good amount of knowledge. They had a good portion of the Northwest Passage kind of mapped. They knew where to enter it. They knew what time of year to go when there was less ice. They knew if they got trapped in the ice, how much supplies they would have to have. And they also know from previous expeditions that Franklin was on that if you were trapped in the ice, there was a way down to the Mackenzie River into Fort Simpson that you could spend the winter and then make your way back home. In fact, William, on his first expedition to the Arctic before he was on HMS the North Star, had to winter at Fort Simpson for 2 years before he came back home. And so they had this knowledge, and it was a combination of those factors that led to their survival. Now, as we know, not everybody comes back, but I really do believe if it wasn't for those so-called failures before them, they wouldn't have had the tools necessary to get home themselves.
Right, so they were operating off the knowledge of those prior failures and successes in order to assure that they returned safely.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a bit more about the Franklin expedition and just what he was trying to accomplish?
Franklin was a seasoned Arctic explorer. Twice in his life, he had been to the Arctic, and so in 1845, he petitioned the Admiralty to go to the Arctic again. He had a very strong argument. He said, look, twice I went to the Arctic and twice I came back. He even published 2 books about his exploits in the Arctic. So the Admiralty agreed, okay, fine. And so they gave Franklin 2 ships, HMS Uberus and the Terror, to go into the Northwest Passage. And as we know, on that fated journey in 1845, Franklin and his 2 ships passed into the Bering Strait, never to be seen again. The famed search for Sir John Franklin has multiple layers. Some say it was the avid love of his wife that pushed her to fund over a dozen expeditions to look for him. Others say the Admiralty were pushing to have answers. When Royal Navy ships went into Northwest Passage, they always came back with a bit of information. Yes, the ship was lost here. This, crew member died here. But people generally came back. In fact, Franklin came back twice from the Arctic. So the fact that he was gone, like absolutely gone without a trace, both his ships, all of his men, and himself, it was unfathomable. So I think there was a drive and a need to know, to have the answers of what really happened to these men.
Jen, thank you so much for showing me these 2 medals and the unique story of the brothers to whom they were awarded.
Oh, well, thank you. We're very proud to have them.
Thank you very much.
We'll never really know the personal reasons to why William and Pullen ended up on the mission together, or how they personally felt about being there together. But obviously, the expedition was so significant to them that there was a continual bond through that experience. Because when William Lloyd passed away, he passed on his Arctic Expedition medal to his nieces, the daughters of Thomas, and then those daughters continued to pass them on down through the family to Hugh Francis Pullen, who served in the Royal Canadian Navy.
When we return after the break, I'll examine the progression of military helmets at the Army Museum, uncovering how each design has improved the safety and effectiveness of soldiers on the battlefield. At the Army Museum, I'm exploring the evolution of helmets with expert Gary Melville. From ancient battlefields to modern warfare, helmets have always been a testament to humanity's enduring priority, protection. We'll examine how these essential pieces of gear have evolved to safeguard soldiers throughout history. Gary, there's probably no single more recognizable helmet than the M1. It's, of course, the one that we see in all those movies and TV shows about the World War II and Vietnam. But tell me, what is the genesis of the usage of the helmet?
So in the Canadian Army, the genesis of the helmet is in the First World War. Prior to that, any of the helmets you see on soldiers are ceremonial. They're made of cork, like the Wolseley helmet or a pith helmet, that sort of thing. Or in the cavalry, they've got brass helmets with plumes and that sort of thing there for show. But the first functional one is in the First World War.
And do you have any of those examples we could take a look at?
Yes, we do. I've got a bunch of them out next door if you'd like to take a look.
That'd be great.
Let's go. So as we were talking, they were first introduced in 1915. And this helmet was the one that was introduced in 1915. First glance, that looks the same as that, but there are some subtle differences. When they came out, when they first started using them, they felt that they were too shiny and the edges were too sharp. So what they did was they went from this helmet that has just a raw edge on it and it's rather shiny, to this helmet here that has this edge here on it. When you flip it over, this is what a First World War helmet looks like.
Now, I know asbestos was sort of a miracle material at the time. Were they using that because it was flame retardant, or do we know why they were putting that in the crown?
I believe it was because it was just so available and so abundant, because they were also using it in the line, in the canisters, the gas masks.
So where do the differences with the World War II helmet start? Underneath, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is a Second World War helmet. On top here, there's just a little tiny bolt. This one's got a full bolt, but it's all on the insides. You can see inside here, they went with a rubber padding. So no more asbestos, it's all rubber. They no longer have a leather chin strap. It's a web chin strap. That's elastic, so it's just a matter of pulling it and putting it over your head.
So Gary, when do we start to make the transition away from that World War II style helmet into what we see here?
So They wore this during the Korean War, and then after the Korean War, we adopted the M1 helmet, a Canadian version of it, but an N1 helmet. We have two back there, and the differences immediately are the camouflage pattern. That was the first camouflage pattern that we used as a camouflage cover, and that was the second one that we used, more woodlands, northern, vice American. The other difference is, in here, you can see it's got an extra pad, and there's a whole bunch of extra straps in here. This was rigged up for a parachutist. This is a parachute helmet, and that's why it has all these extra bits. This one is just what a normal soldier would wear. That's on the back of the head. You adjust that to fit your head and click that around your chin. Early UN missions where they weren't actually fighting, they wore just the inners that were painted blue. So sometimes you come across a helmet like this, pull it out, the liner's painted blue, and that's why. There's two pieces to this. There's an inside, that's a fiberglass helmet.
Right.
Okay, and then on the outside, that's metal.
Oh, that's very interesting. And speaking of those blue UN helmets, what is it we're looking at next?
So this is the first Kevlar-style helmet that Canadians wore, and it's a French Gassat Spectra helmet, and it was issued to Canadians in Yugoslavia because they found that when they were over there, they were still wearing this with a blue cover on it. The UN just realized that they needed better protection for the soldiers, so they issued those helmets to the peacekeeping force. And as I said, it's a Kevlar helmet. This obviously came in different sizes entirely because that's not gonna, if that fits you, it may not fit me.
Right.
Right? So there's nothing here to adjust to your head.
And did we adopt those into general usage or just for Yugoslavia?
Just for Yugoslavia. They bought about 2,000 of these were made in Canada, that style, trialed, and they realized that's not what we want. So then they went to the CG634, which is the Kevlar helmet that we use today. One of the big differences is now you can adjust this to fit your head. Although these did come in 3 sizes. There's a small, medium, and large, whereas those were all one size fits all.
And what's interesting is that's much more reminiscent of the earlier helmets.
Yes.
And it looks like we've even returned to the use of some leather inside. Is that right, Gary?
Yep, right along there. Again, what's new is old and old is new. Like soldiers have been in danger of artillery fire for a long time, but we weren't smart enough to realize that our soldiers needed helmets again. So the reason that helmets took so long to become protection was that warfare had changed. And so now it had become a static warfare with trenches and soldiers in the trenches, and there was more danger of shrapnel from artillery and mortar rounds than there was in the past. And then the other thing you'll notice is that with these two, is we finally admitted that the Germans had it right in their helmet design, and we've got this, so it's not just a round bucket on your head, but actually a better protection along the sides.
And that only took us about 70 years to catch on.
Yep. Well, I'm sure that there was a bit of resistance in that you didn't want to adopt your enemy's helmet like as soon as the war was over.
Of course.
Yeah, so it took a while. And in our case, we figured, okay, we'll use the American one because it's...
Right.
Because again, these helmets here were not meant to protect you from a bullet to the head. It was ricochets, shrapnel, and that sort of thing. So in the first war, they made perfect sense because you're in the trenches, artillery's going off above you, shrapnel's coming down. That's going to protect your shoulders and a lot of your head.
Thank you very much for showing these to me today, Gary. It's been interesting to see the innovations behind what is really 100 years of Canadian military helmets.
Well, it's my pleasure, Sandy. Again, these are items that are in our storage that, occasionally will make it out on the floor, but we don't have the opportunity because of the lack of space here to get them all out and showcase how things have changed and why they changed. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to bring items like this out and show them to the public. What we looked at today is not the end of helmet development or technology. I'm sure if we did this 10 years from now, I'd have 1 or 2 more helmets on that table and telling you why that they're better than anything we had before and why did it take us so long to get there.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.